thought it was tough to navigate the challenges of moving church online all across America? Well, wait till we try to open them back up again. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. Restaurants, theaters, sports teams, theme parks, all are scrambling to figure out if and when and how they can get people back to business. At the same time, and far more important for many of us, churches are trying to figure out how to reopen as well. Not only are such plans complicated by all the official regulations and recommendations that differ not only from state to state but even county to county, but different theologies and different worship styles matter as well. More sacramental churches that emphasize participatory worship and weekly communion face certain challenges. Massive congregations with huge crowds face others. Some congregations consist of a high number of at-risk members due to their age or other factors. Some do not. And after navigating all of these challenges, it's still not clear just how many people are willing to show up again. And all of this is being navigated in the context of differing opinions. Just about every church I know is made up of some members who are fearful and others who are convinced that the threat of COVID-19 was completely overblown, and still others who are somewhere in between. Everyone has their opinions, and some think their opinion is the same as orthodoxy. All of this means, according to Baylor historian Philip Jenkins, that people in the future will think about church in terms of BC, before coronavirus, and after. The key factor in Jenkins' fascinating analysis, which we'll link to at breakpoint.org, is what we might call pre-existing conditions to coronavirus. In other words, in many ways, the coronavirus hasn't so much created problems for the church as it has revealed and accelerated them. One particular pre-existing condition that Jenkins believes will be accelerated by this crisis is secularization, especially here in the U.S. Now, to be clear, secularization is not the same thing as atheism or even a decline or destruction of faith. Rather, as Jenkins describes, secularization is a decline of religious institutions and a decisive shift in religious practice to individual and privatized forms. In other words, secularization takes personal faith and makes it private, often by making us more and more religiously unaffiliated. So Jenkins thinks it's quite possible that the U.S. in the 2020s will witness a rapid secular trend that's comparable to Western Europe in the 1960s, in which church attendance declines and religious conviction is seen as less and less appropriate for public life. Historically, writes Jenkins, pandemics and diseases have often played a major role in shaping religion and in undermining older religious establishments. And we live in a time where institutions have already been weakened in many ways. And even if the coronavirus sparks a revival in personal piety or privatized faith, as many have suggested, Jenkins counters that religious institutions will likely be weakened, not strengthened. Now, part of the challenge is, of course, financial. That alone, Jenkins predicts, will lead to a new age of church closure and mergers. A recent Washington Post article described the severe financial effects of this pandemic that's already being felt by many churches. And churches that are able to weather the economic part of this storm face the very real possibility that people will just prefer watching services online instead of being physically present from here on out. It's a poor substitute for the real thing, of course, but look, our culture's veneration of personal choice plus performance-driven church services that are already largely experienced on screens, that can prove a deadly combination to Sunday morning church attendance. Another way to say this is, for too many Christians, church was already kind of considered non-essential. That official label, though given for purposes of efficiency and categorization, should concern anyone who thinks of the Christian faith as actually being truth. Now, Jenkins' predictions, as he admits, are controversial. Historian Kyle Harper reminded Rod Dreher that the 3rd century plague of Cyprian weakened Roman institutions and helped pave the way for the triumph of Christianity. And another plague in the 6th century indirectly led to the Christianization of Britain. And to be fair, this virus is changing all kinds of different aspects of our culture besides the church. So it remains to be seen just what kind of impact all of this will come to. And more importantly, there are other pre-existing conditions that predate late modern Western culture. For example, Paul warned Timothy that Christians would face persecution and tribulation and that some would fall away during those times. And yet the most important pre-existing condition is always the resurrected Christ, who promised that the gates of hell could not prevail against his church. From that solid foundation, And only from that solid foundation are we able to think about this cultural moment and what the future will hold for the church and our culture. The one thing we can know is we can't assume that life after coronavirus will be the same as life before it, especially for the church. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.